I'm just curious about your research with were your interviews with the 50 soldiers. How many combat deployments have they had to Iraq and Afghanistan, either or? What were their military occupational specialties, and how long had they been serving?
That's easy and fast, and so I'll answer it. We, as an anthropologist, we do really kind of weird random sampling thing that is not at all scientific in any way, shape, or form, and we call it snowball sampling, which just means we sort of go through whoever we can. So we sent out a lot of snowballs, and they picked up a few people along the way, and then so I would talk to anybody that would talk to us. I had to take out a couple of the interviews because they were problematic. I don't have the statistics off the top of my head, but so of the 50 people, I think about 15 of them had, or maybe 20, multiple deployments to Iraq. MOS is all over the board, military occupation specialties all over the board. One of the people interviewing us was a Intel guy. One of my research assistants was an Intel guy, and so he got a lot of his Intel buddies, so we kind of had a little bit more of that represented. We went down from what's above a private, the one above a private. I'm so bad with military special. I need the little chart in front of me, yes. From all the way up to a colonel. Full bird all the way up. And everybody had been there for at least 6 months, and many people from all over the place. So they were, and some of them had served training the Iraqi police and army. Others had very little contact with Iraqis. Had a translator who all she did was translate, and never, I don't think, ever actually had contact with an Iraqi the entire time she was there. She just sat and did radio communications and stuff. And she was one of the least culturally knowledgeable person of the group that which I thought was fascinating, that she could know the language and not actually have any cultural sort of awareness. Your question, I get asked this because when I talk to people in the military, I've never taken money from the military. None of my research is funded by the military, and I don't consult with the military. But I do lots of public presentations, and I'll do public presentations to the for the military, or contractors and stuff. And they say, well, what should we do? What should we do? What should we do? I'm not the person to tell people what to do. I mean, if you had asked me, I would have said don't invade in the first place because of all of the reasons that invasions rarely succeed. For the reasons that you mentioned in Algeria and elsewhere, that there's always going to be resistance. But I also think the U.S. missed the boat, and the reason I brought up that Bremer and the elections point was the U.S. invaded. Had they done what they sort of said they were going to do and pulled out quickly and said to Iraqis, here, it's your country, lead it, I don't think it would have been as bad as it is now. But we'll never know. And hopefully we will never have the chance to experience this with another country that we invade. But
my question to you, does occupation clash with culture and nationalism and religion?
No, occupation clashes with human dignity and human rights. I mean, it's not about culture or anything else, or religion, or any of those sorts of things. Yeah.
Okay. Ted Katsouf. Well, your talk did not deal with it. Seems to me there were two states one can think of that were carved out after World War I, Yugoslavia and Iraq. And both were different ethnic groups, different religions, and both were, in the vernacular, led by real SOBs who wanted to be sure that everybody feared and respected them. I mean, do you see any pattern there?
Yeah, I'm not a political scientist, and I don't really deal with these things. But yeah, I mean, I think people who study leaders and leadership, and certainly, I mean, one of the things that I've written about is about sort of nationalist sentiments and how Iraqis feel about their nation and their culture, and how Americans feel about their nation, and what defines patriotism. and they're like, as they say in Arabic, "Kum fi wad wa ihna fi wad." It's like they're in a valley and we're in a valley. Like they're just like the American sense of what constitutes patriotic duty and nationalism is like going this way, and Iraqis are going this way. I mean, no. Because Americans think that in order to be patriotic, you should serve your country, you should do what is asked of you, you have a responsibility to build and dedicate yourself. And Americans don't understand why Iraqis are not stepping forward and building up their country and picking up their garbage and doing all of this sort of stuff. And I'm actually kind of addressing your issue. Iraqis they were under the sort of the oppressive hand of Saddam Hussein for however many decades you want to count his rule. And it was cradle to grave, taking care of society. So society developed in a way that the state was there for everything. I mean, everything good and everything bad. And all of a sudden that disappears in 2003. And Iraqis may love Iraq, and they may feel very strongly about Iraq, but the Americans are now in charge. And it's the Americans who should be doing all this sort of stuff, not Iraqis. So there's a very different sense of what is patriotism and nationalism, in part because of the leadership. So I think that was where I was trying to go to answer your question, because of the leaders that were there.
Okay, let's take two questions from the overflow room. Somebody asking, curious as to your research regarding the use of interpreters as cultural guides, as most, if not all, cultural interactions were facilitated by interpreters, not smart cards. And the second, this is from the State Department. Do you feel the primary factor in the success of the surge was a result of better cross-cultural communication by the military?
About the interpreters, yes, we interviewed Iraqi interpreters, and we also, one of the things we asked about of the people, of the U.S. soldiers and Marines that we interviewed, we asked about their use of interpreters as cultural guides, and they were by far. And I have an article on the subject of this. It's in a volume published by the University of Chicago Press called Anthropology and Global Counterinsurgency, and you can email me and I can send it to you, or I think it's on the website. But yeah, the soldiers and Marines that we interviewed all turned to, since their cultural training they said was so bad, they all used interpreters as their cultural liaisons, and many of them said the interpreters saved our lives, or they gave us important information that got us various ways, and so that was what almost all of them thought most useful. The problem was many of them didn't have, some of them, the ones we talked to, didn't have interpreters all the time or in different parts. The success of the surge, I haven't done research on this, and so I can't really answer this question. You asked, was it a result of better cross-cultural communication by the military? So I can give you a kind of uninformed my response, and I would say that no, that it was actually more about the military figuring out, learning more about Iraq and how Iraq was functioning, and learning more about the function of power. But I don't. I mean, I think there's been some real problems with the way that the military has and the policies that have gone towards in the surge in terms of its more long-term effects on Iraq. But again, that's not. I don't know a lot about the subject.
Two questions. We'll do Alan,